welcome to another episode of the Sunday Superversive Livestream. I am your host, the thing currently pretending to be Ben Wheeler, and here today I have Anthony Marchetta as himself. Indeed, truly himself. He will not answer my emails, he will not answer my phone calls. I just want to be let in. And David Halquist, who is coming along nicely. Uh, David Halquist is the writer for several book series for Chris Kennedy's outfit, which I'm sure he will. I will let him shill for a moment. But today we have a variety hour um, where we're going to talk about Shonen Jump, and then we're going to move around to just whatever happens to catch our fancy. Probably Phoenix, right? Have you enjoyed your rice ball hamburgers today? I don't know. How are you guys doing? Amazing. Amazing. David falls under the actually delivers category of long series writers, which are few and far between. But yeah, we have quite a few things to talk about. The big one for me is Shonen Jump. We haven't had a Shonen Jump live stream in quite some time, so I am eager to talk about it. Uh, there's a few things that kind of get to me. Recently, they had some stories start and end within, I don't know, 30 weeks, give or take. And it just feels kind of like, they're trying to find things that will replace what was lost by things like Food Wars, Bleach, and other things like that. Uh, Over the course of the last, I don't know, couple years or so, we have Ayashimon, uh, Doron Dororon, Earthchild, Super Smartphone, Aliens Area. Earthchild is bad, but Super Smartphone, Alien Area, Doron Dororon, and Ayashimon was pretty good. And then much more recently, we had, um, I didn't like this one, but Tokyo Demon Bride story. Uh, I might have written a Pinkerton's Ghost episode that just has one character killing the main character of that series. I will not say. It's a secret. Then we had stuff that I actually really enjoyed, like Glinka and Gluna, which was a magical adventure series. And yeah, yep, I enjoyed it. Then we had Ichigoki Under Control, which was just kind of bad, but I couldn't look away because sometimes they actually had a joke so good I laughed. Which I want to be clear, I almost never laugh when reading anything, even if I find it supremely funny. I just don't laugh. And it's that, but they actually had a couple of scenes where it was like, this is so ridiculous. All right, I'll give it a sensible chuckle, and even a guffaw. But some other series that have started, Akane Banashi, which is the Rakugo one, which is just okay, great character design. Ichinose Family's Deadly Sins, which is a mystery that I think is wrapping up soon. Cipher Academy, which is by the guy behind Monogatari, which is I want to talk about much more later if either of you guys have read that. Fabricant one. No, he it's behind it's the guy who writes Cipher Academy is the Bakemonogatari guy. Yep. Then I'll I don't. Fabricant 100, which I think is Anthony and I's favorite, if you don't mind me saying so. And then we have Tenmaku Cinema and Kill Blue, neither of which interest me in the least. I've read both of them. I will not be following them. Cinema feels like a Fujimoto kind of quasi wannabe ripoff, like taking the ideas of cinema but without the zaniness of Chainsaw Man. Hmm. Tenmaku Cinema. Yep. Nope. And honestly, it's almost unpleasant for some of it. Kill Blue is about an assassin who's turned into a kid, and now he has to protect this school, and it's just kind of gross. Doesn't It's not funny. It's the action's not really that good. I'm kind of it's got a great premise, but I'm kind of shocked that that it was kind of allowed on there actually. Uh, I just I absolutely kind of hate it. So you know that's that. Plus, with the strength of One Piece and My Hero Academia right now, is actually Shonen Jump seems to be in a pretty strong position. It's just that there's, mm, yeah, Vigilante. His Vigilante arc should have taken longer. Mm-hmm. I mean, the last panel today was whew. Which, if I may, that was actually the arc that made me love MHA. The Gentle La Brava is a fantastic arc. Yes, easy 100 chapters. Uh-huh. Oh, he's going to die. The amount of death flags in this thing is absolutely insane. Yep. Oh my goodness, Anthony. They haven't been able to hear us. Or you. Oh my goodness, why does it do this? My mic was working. All right, Anthony. So repeat what you said for the last 27 minutes, please. All
It's
right.
okay. I
So
actually only probably spoke for like 5, and I could summarize it in 30 seconds.
yeah, sorry
Uh,
about that, guys. For some reason, my computer refuses to register my speakers for sometimes through Streamlabs. It works fine on my end. I heard everything. It was quite amazing. Like we were in tears. But
yeah, it was beautiful. Now you get the Cliff Notes version.
yeah,
Uh, okay, so Cliff Notes version of what I just said is that I think that My Hero Academia is I think that its reputation is of like typical shonen schlock if well made, and I think that while there is some truth to that as a criticism, I have always thought and still think that Horikoshi is a little bit better than that. Like he's a little bit better and deserves a little bit more respect than to be dismissed that way. And specifically, I would say that there are some plot beats and threads in MHA that Horikoshi like spends a surprising amount of time setting up. One example of this is that when All Might gets into his fight with All for One, he almost dies, but he is inspired by the people around him, and he literally yells, "I refuse to die," and he wins the fight and survives. Later, we meet Sir Night Eye, and Sir Night Eye can prophesy about the future, and Deku manages to break the prophecy of Sir Night Eye because Deku has like such an iron will that he basically refuses to let fate win is like the explanation that's kind of given. And the reason I think that this is actually a fairly clever bit of writing is that though Sir Night Eye was introduced later, we learn that there is a prophecy that Sir Night Eye saw that All Might was going to die. I think the implication that the story is going with, though it's kind of subtle, is that All Might was supposed to die in that first fight with All for One, and that his iron will is what and his refusal to give in to fate, where he literally says, "I refuse to die," is the reason that All Might was able to break it. And this is all set up later. Like it's not set up in the moment. There are other things like this too. This is and now we're onto new material. None of this was said before. Deku's fight with Bakugo is a great example of Deku admits to himself when he's fighting with Bakugo that Bakugo is the symbol of that even though All Might is the symbol of peace, right? The symbol of victory in Deku's mind is Bakugo. So when it suddenly is at the end of his rope and he wants to reach down and find not a desire like to save everyone, but a desire to win, it is Bakugo who he thinks of. And they flash back to a moment when he's fighting with the villain Muscular. And in his fight with the villain Muscular, he's almost defeated. And then he starts yelling at Muscular as if I'd let you hurt Koda. The idea I won't let you lay a hand on him. In other words, he starts yelling not quite as brash as Bakugo would, but similar to things like what Bakugo would say. Basically, as if I'd let you win, right? Like, I'm about to lose. There's no way I'm going to let you win. I'm not going to let you win. And really cleverly, in his fight with Bakugo, when he says that Bakugo is the symbol of victory, he flashes back to that fight with Muscular. So, the pieces for this fight with Bakugo were already laid way back in that fight with Muscular. It's a very subtle bit of writing, but I think it's pretty impressive and pretty clever. Horikoshi can do that. Like, he's definitely not on the level of a Hiromu Arakawa or I would say even an Araki, at least at his best, right? When Araki mastered the form in Steel Ball Run
yeah.
and the best moments of Stone Ocean, he's not quite at the level of like late career Araki or a Hiromu Arakawa, but and he's definitely doesn't have like the intense world building of an Oda either. Let's not leave out One Piece. But I do think that Horikoshi is definitely like there's more going on in his stories, and I think people sometimes give him credit for. He does set up plot beats in advance. Like there's clearly a plan there. Sometimes it looks as if he calls audibles, and I think that might be due to health issues that are forcing him to move faster than he necessarily wants to. But the pieces are in place. And currently in MHA, I feel like the story's been turned around. This last chapter was amazing. All Might is almost certainly about to die here because they've been planting death flags around All Might since the first chapter, as David said. Now, to give you some context in the story, All Might is about to battle with All for One with no quirk and possibly it appears to be a mech suit. And it seems impossible that there's any way that All Might can survive this battle. He's probably going to do something that will allow Deku to win. In fact, I'm sure he is, because it would be bad writing if he didn't. But he is also almost certainly going to die in this battle.
I mean,
but I'm impressed. I'm enjoying the story a lot right now.
The face that All for One puts on, though, whew, 10 out of 10 art. Ooh.
My Hero Academia has never slacked in the artwork department, even when the story was slowing down, and even when it was starting to get maybe he's running out of steam. The artwork was always 10 of 10.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, that face that All for One makes is incredible.
Yep.
But yeah, so that's just a nice thing for people who are fans of MHA. If you've been kind of underwhelmed with the final arc, pick it up again because it's kind of pulling itself together.
I'm gonna take a moment to talk about Cypher Academy. I'm enjoying it, even though the puzzles aren't necessarily my thing. I do enjoy a good brain teaser. The thing I like it though is that it's clearly an overstocked cast in any other situation. But the guy balances out pretty well. They all have their own quirks. They all make different decisions, and there's all a reason why they have different decisions to make. The premise of the story is that there is a all-female school called Cypher Academy that is essentially a training ground for spies and cryptographers. And, shenanigans happen with the one guy who is incredibly feminine, as these things go in Japan, coming out and sort of throwing his hat into the ring. Each chapter has multiple puzzles, around 3 or so, that you're supposed to go through and sort of try and figure out yourself. It's very well done, very well made, and it's very enjoyable. The thing that gets me, though, is that he has this trick that you can only do in a visual medium, where instead of what they're saying, if they're just saying other nonsense or whatever, it has a black bar and it says enemy propaganda or playing the mob or instead of is this chapter still loaded? Hold on, it's still free. Let me see if it's still free. Like they have this one chapter where they're doing no, it's gone. A thing where this girl's talking, and instead of any dialogue, and she talks for a full page, it's just black bar after this, after provocation, after Pravda reports and this, because she's playing a character that's hunting out other spies, and it's like, I dig it, I understand what she's saying, but it doesn't actually matter what she's saying because it's not related to the plot. It's part of the character, and it's all lies anyway. Then you have another, they have the current enemy is called Anonymity Chan, whose special ability is that no one can read her face. And she cheats and wins her game. Except it's not really a cheat so much as she just kind of, looked at the cards.
They're at a spy academy, isn't cheating expected?
Exactly. And it freaks everyone else out because she didn't abide by the rules of the game. But she's like, War doesn't abide by the rules of the game. What are you talking about? And it's a great image because in the picture, she's actually reaching out of the screen and snapping the character bio pic in her hand. Like, so it's like every time they introduce a character who's like major for the arc, they have this um, uh, special like border, and she's actually reaching out and snapping it with her hands uh, for everything. It was pretty good. Like it's one of those things where it's like you could only do it in a visual medium, and it's pretty good. All the ciphers they have are fair. You could figure them out yourself if you're so inclined. I'm not. I just like it because it's kind of fun. Let me see something. And it just kind of like has a decent amount to it that makes it very enjoyable. Let me see here. Vertical.
So
Oh,
I'll
here
tell
it
you
is.
while you're
Okay, hold on.
oh,
I
you
found
found
it.
it. Then
Yeah.
I'll let you go first before because I wanted to fill the dead air.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It just took me a second. So what the character says in the dialogue is slander, demagoguery, expanding pet theories, spreading rumors, negative campaign, complete with like hand gestures and stuff like that. It's pretty fun. Oh well. That's all I
So
really had to say because it's enjoyable, but at the same time you know it's interesting.
So I'll tell you, I tried to read and I was intrigued by the premise of and read the first like couple chapters or so. I can't remember exactly how many, first few chapters of
Yeah.
Cypher Academy. And I ended up dropping it, and this is for a couple of reasons. First, the ciphers themselves are literally almost impossible for an American to solve, in many cases at least. Uh, this is one of the reasons that I mentioned earlier when probably you guys couldn't hear me, but the translator had to quit Cipher Academy. Uh, and I can totally understand why, because the ciphers have to be like nearly impossible to translate.
You know, like
Uh,
Japanese puns or something.
The
yeah, stuff like that, and references to Japanese, places and culture, and like and the Japanese alphabet. Or whatever you would call it. I don't even know what you would call the
they
Japanese writing system.
they
Uh,
have an explicit puzzle that's like they break up the Japanese syllables between two people, and they can only speak using the syllables they have chosen.
yeah, that had to be an absolute nightmare for the translator to even try to do. Uh, but besides that, like, I couldn't follow the puzzle, so I wasn't following it on that level. And there was just something that I really was very weird to me about their choice to make the main character a boy in an all-girl school who looked like a girl. It felt very like just wrong to read.
Like they weren't making a harem anime like thing. It was clearly he was effeminate, and there was not even any
Yes.
of that going on there.
Yeah, he
Okay.
was effeminate, so it was really strange. I was reading it going like, why this character? Like I guess I do understand, but that just is kind of worse. I don't like it. Yeah,
To
it's
me,
just really
yeah,
it's gross.
yeah.
Uh so for that reason I ended up, even though I do like the premise and everything that you say is a perfectly valid like benefit of the series, I just found it too uncomfortable to read. I didn't like the main character, and it's a shame because there were some moments in it that were very cool. Like she teams up with the one girl to you know go after the bully girl. Uh, I say she, but it's a he. She teams up with the one girl to go after the bully girl in the early chapter, and then the bully girl reveals like, so you teamed up with her to stop war. It's like maybe you don't realize this, but she's actually like the angel of death, and if she wins, then she is going to increase war by at least double. And that was like the end of chapter reveal, and now you're like, wait, so who do we believe? It was a good moment, like unironically a really strong moment to end the chapter on. I just couldn't get past. I really didn't like the main character.
No,
Uh,
that's perfectly legitimate.
but yeah, and I couldn't follow the ciphers, which was another thing that was just not. I can't blame the series for it. That's not its fault, but it was a little disappointing to me. Uh, of the new series that are out now though and still going, 100% my absolute favorite and your favorite was Fabricant 100.
Mm-hmm.
So, Ben, this story goes that I read the first chapter of Fabricant 100. I saw the premise and I said, okay, that's really good. And I read the first chapter and I said, dude, take a look at this. This is going to be a hit. And Ben read the first chapter and said, I'm skeptical. Uh,
It's true.
which is, and he was right to be, because the first chapter was more potential than potential realized, if that makes sense, right?
Yes.
Like the pieces were in place, but it had not hit it yet. Now, that's not unheard of that a story doesn't hit its potential in chapter one, but generally you do want to put your best foot forward as early as possible. So I was like, all of your criticism, Ben offered like a few, criticisms of them. I said, all of your criticisms are completely legitimate, and I can't really disagree with any of them. It's just that this premise is so good that I really hope that like this hits the potential, because the potential is like sky high. The pre-
what is the premise?
yeah, the premise of Fabricant 100 is basically like Victorian magical realism Blade Runner. Uh,
Ooh,
With
wow.
Frankenstein.
yeah, meets Frankenstein.
I
So
mean, yeah.
So the idea is that in this world that is sort of parallel to the Victorian era, but with like magical powers just kind of peppered around here and there,
Huh.
like, and very casual magical powers too. Uh, and the in Fabricant 100, this mad scientist decides that he wants to create the perfect human being. So he starts experimenting, creating these beings and discarding them, not killing them, just pushing them to the side when they're not the perfect being. Until finally, after Fabricant 100, uh, he realizes that it's still not a perfect being and he has failed. And does he kill himself, Ben? I can't remember exactly. Or does he just die?
I think he I think he just dies, but he might kill himself.
Yeah, either way, I suspect he's actually still alive, but in story at the moment, he is dead.
Yes.
Uh, so Anyway, this leaves these creatures who he created, which are called fabricants, because he makes them out of some sort of like fabric that he stitches together. Uh, the fabricants now have one desire, and that is to become perfect humans. And in order to do that, remember we're in a world with magical realism where people have these crazy powers. They want to steal perfect body parts from various humans and absorb them into themselves.
Yep.
So which is a absolutely fantastic premise immediately. I love everything about it. And then you get into the more specific character premise. The main character is a 14-year-old kid from a family that is known for being like, genetically having one of the most powerful, like, they don't call it magic in this, but it's their magic system, right? Like, one of
Yeah.
the most powerful magic bloodlines.
We're not saying it's
So,
magic, but it's
yeah,
magic.
so naturally, it's targeted by the fabricants who slaughter his entire family. Uh, and the survivor, the 14-year-old boy, is the last one alive. He was his sister. I did something to make sure that he would be the last one alive. And the fabricant there is the most who has killed his family is there with a group of fabricants, and she is fabricant number 100. And he tells her, "I want to make a deal with you. If you help me take out all of the other fabricants, then when I turn 18 and grow to adulthood, and because I'm part of this family, I have like the best genetics of any human, you know, so I will have the perfect body for you to steal. That when I turn 18, I'll give you my body, and in return, you work with me to take out all of the other fabricants." And Fabricant 100 says, "That sounds like a good deal." And she immediately slaughters all of the other fabricants there. and says, "All right, let's get started." And that's how the story opens, with him on a case to rescue a guy whose girlfriend was murdered by a fabricant. So that's the story, and what a premise. It's true that the first chapter was more like, it was kind of using the premise as a crutch, I guess you might say. Like,
Yeah.
the first chapter wasn't anything special, I guess. It was good. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's an entertaining first chapter. But, it's like they're chasing after a fabricant whose thing is like it runs really fast. And
Yeah.
Blade
that's.
Runner with cloth robots, basically.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's Blade Runner. That's what it is. It's Blade Runner. Uh, like, its thing is that it runs really fast, and that's fine, but not a super creative power. Nothing crazy with it. But what puts the series over the top eventually, and that made Ben get excited over it, is that it revealed, and it was always there in the background, right? But it
Yeah.
revealed a horror edge to it that it started to utilize more. And the horror edge, it like had made for some really powerful moments. Like, what was the one moment? There was a particular moment, Ben, that like made you a fan. Do you remember what it was?
Hold on, give me a second.
It had to do with the Fabricant 100, with number 100 set. Like, you learn she's lying about something.
Yeah, like they're doing a test with Mortsafe and the secret organization that's hunting down fabricants, and like she's finally taken away from Ashibi, and she's
Who's the
just
main character, by the
who's
way?
the main character, and basically it's like, listen, the only reason I haven't killed all of you flesh bags is because Ashibi would be unhappy. Like sort of thing. Like he wouldn't like it. He wouldn't give me his body. Uh, so it's like it's it just has a good element to it. Like it hits it right. You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah,
can't.
and then since then, it started to utilize that horror element more, and it's been very effective. Like, the next case that they go on, they have to go, and it was a good twist. Like, I actually gave them credit for. Like, they had a twist in the story, and it really worked for me. So he has to go after a fabricant that has, similar to him in number 100, has teamed up with somebody with the intention of taking her voice, I think it was, eventually.
Yes.
So he goes there, and you're like, okay, so obviously the reason they sent me on this is because they want me to see that, somebody else did this and turned evil, right? Like, that's what's going on here, and they want to make sure that I can still do it. And then it's like, no, that's actually not it. Instead, what happens is he goes to, it's an opera show
Mm-hmm.
that they need to go. So they need to take on, she's an opera singer, and you learn that she's actually a terrible singer. Uh, but the fabricant like has a great voice. Like, maybe it was a later fabricant, so it just had a strong voice. I forget why it
Mm-hmm.
did, but they reveal that. So it sings, and she's made a deal. She's very beautiful. That if it makes her an opera star, she'll give him her body. So she's not teaming up with the fabricant to do anything. And then he goes, "So do you know that the fabricant like kills people?" And she's like, "Yeah, I don't care." But the
Wow.
twist is that once it meets a Shibi, one of the rules with fabricants is that if you are, it will always go for whoever is like the most ideal human, right, in front
Yep.
of them. It can't resist. So as soon as this fabricant who's controlling the opera singer sees a Shibi, it immediately kills the opera singer. Like, immediately. And
Yep.
goes after Ashibi instead. It is a brutal moment. And I'm like, that's actually really clever, because I didn't see it coming, but it follows the rules and it makes perfect sense.
Yep.
Like, that's the sort of thing that if Fabricant 100 wants to, like, continue its rise, it's got to continue with stuff like that. I'm also still waiting. I'm hoping to see, that was the closest we've gotten, but I'm hoping to see a really good fight scene at one point. I think that would really put it over the top. But that wasn't bad. That was a fine, it was a good enough scene.
Yeah, like it's
JD Cohen.
mhm.
Oh, go ahead. Finish what you're saying first.
Like it's one of those things that's like super competent. Nothing's really bad about it. It's just maybe not the same highs or lows as everything else. Because it's like the thing I was thinking about is the scene where he's separated out. He sees her through the TV. Where it's like, he describes it like a bear rifling through a house, not killing anyone. When she's with people who hold no value to her, she doesn't even pretend to act human.
Yeah,
And it's got this great silhouette look where she's just sitting in a chair. Just sitting in a chair.
There is no utility in moving.
Right.
Right.
kind of though. That's kind of like what they're going for there. And
Right.
there's also the moment they have one other twist in that story where although this one I think you could probably see coming if you've read the story up to that point, where the leader of the organization that hunts fabricants, they go up to him and go, "So why didn't you save the opera singer? Like, why didn't you send me? I probably could have saved her, right?"
Right.
And then he goes, "Because a Shibi can be and fabric and number 100, if he can rein her in, like to use, can actually be really good fabricant hunters. But in order for that to happen, he needs to learn like that you cannot show mercy to fabricants ever. And I am willing to sacrifice one person in order to get across that lesson and save however many more people that he might save when he becomes a great fabricant hunter."
Yep.
And they're like, "Are you sure about that?" He's like, "Yeah, I am completely sure about this." So also a good moment in the story, but yeah, Ben's moment is good, but that was the one that hit me when the fabricant kills the opera singer. I completely did not see that coming, but once they explained it, I'm like, that actually makes perfect sense. Like that follows all of the rules of fabricants that they've set up to this point, that the fabricant would do that. And it's a really brutal moment because one of the things that, they're always going to kind of do, fabricant number 100, they've definitely made kind of waifu bait, I guess you would say. But that's sort of the point. You're naturally going to become attached to the character, but the character is just straight up evil. I say Blade Runner, but Blade Runner isn't exactly right. It's more like the original book by Philip K. Dick, Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. In Blade Runner, it was the uh, androids that were the quote unquote good guys, right? And it was the
Mm-hmm.
humans who were the villains. But
Well,
in the
certainly the
book,
Terrell Corporation was
yeah,
the
exactly.
nemesis. The androids and the humans were kind of a mixed lot.
Yeah,
But yeah.
exactly. But they were, that's the point though. Androids were basically like humans, right? Like
Mhm.
there were good ones, there were bad ones, but they were human in the end.
Right.
That was the point. That was the point of the Tears in the Rain scene, which is a great scene, by the way, and justly famous. But in the book version, it took me a while, and I had to read an interview by Dick to get it. That
Eh.
is not the case at all. Like, if you ask Dick what he thinks of the androids, he's like, "I think androids are soulless and evil." He's like, "I think that they're monsters. I think that they need to be put down." You know, that's not the point of his story at all. The point of his story is that humans are humans, and no matter how good of an imitation you make, that's not the same as being a human. This is why Decker finds a toad at the end of it, and it's a real toad, and Decker suddenly realizes instead of like an android toad, hence that's the title. Like, do androids dream of electric sheep? It's
Right.
that people have android animals that they keep, because
Oh,
they can't afford.
that's absolutely coming.
Yeah, you're right, but it's that they can't afford real animals, so they keep android animals.
Hmm.
So at the end of the story, Decker finds a real, or what he thinks at the time is a real toad, and he has a revelation where he realizes the value of this is real. It is a real animal. It's a toad. It's not a robot. It's not an android. It's a toad. And then he learns that the toad is in fact an android. Now, this is the genius of the ending. in a lesser author, this would have been used as a reveal for, like, and this is why Decker is wrong and androids and humans are the same. But that's not what Dick does. Decker thinks for a moment when he learns that the Toad is actually an android, and he says, I'm disappointed to know that, but I'm glad that I know the truth. Because Decker still recognizes that even if he can't tell the difference, there is still a difference between artificial and real. Fabricant 100, I think, is more in the vein of Philip K. Dick's story than the movie Blade Runner. JD says Fabricant 100 has potential, but I think it'll probably get canceled early like Ayashimon unfortunately was. Yeah, I'm worried about that. I don't know what the numbers for it are. Like Ben said, part of the problem is, as strong as the hook is, it's more that it's doing everything competently well than it's doing anything outstanding. So it's not going, like, My Hero Academia was always, it came in at the exact perfect time. It was a perfect storm type of story, right? It cashed in on the superhero craze. It had incredible artwork that mimicked the Western style, but with an anime flair. And it still fit a lot of the Japanese storytelling tropes, so that was always going to be a hit, right? Like, it was lightning in a bottle type thing. Fabricant 100 doesn't seem like it has that sort of feel to me, unfortunately, that lightning in a bottle look. It's not this level of genius of another story that we're going to talk about in a moment, Chainsaw Man. Right? Like,
Yeah.
Chainsaw Man is a
You're gonna
genius.
have to sell me on Chainsaw Man. I saw the promo for that, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. But you're
Yeah,
the guys to sell it, so.
Oh, that's a challenge then. Okay. I would
It
be
looks
happy
like
to, and I'm
everything
sure
I
with
would
Ben.
hate, but I've no doubt missed
So,
something crucial.
Chainsaw Man. I didn't think this originally, and I still am kind of iffy on people overrating it, but at the very least, Chainsaw Man is a classic. It is on the borderline of a masterpiece.
Holy
Uh,
cats!
like, I think, Ben, would you agree with that assessment?
It's a masterpiece.
That's some
Yeah,
strong
I
praise.
would say classic, borderline masterpiece. Masterpiece is not an unreasonable position to take. So I'm going to give you my pitch on Chainsaw Man. Chainsaw Man is in the vein of a lot of different Japanese stories that are about demon hunting organizations, right? Demon Slayer literally has the exact same topic. Jujutsu Kaisen has
Right,
the
this thing's
exact
just set in
same
modern
premise.
day Japan.
Yeah,
And
Jujutsu Kaisen, Demon Slayer, and Chainsaw Man essentially all have the same premise, reworked in a different way, right?
sure.
Uh, Jujutsu Kaisen is very well made, but incredibly nihilistic, and for that reason, it's hard for me to recommend. Demon Slayer is competent, but in my opinion, uninspired overall. It is good, but not great, and was overrated. It came at the exact perfect time to take advantage of, cultural factors in Japan and around the world to become the
I
hit it
liked
did.
it. I didn't go crazy about it the way other people
Yeah,
did, but
it's
I
good.
thought it was good. You know.
Demon Slayer is baby's first shonen. That's the way I would explain it. Like, it's good baby's first shonen, but like you have no idea. Like, I've had discussions like on forums and things with fans of Demon Slayer, and it's like it kind of drives me insane because they'll be like, you know, Demon Slayer. What I love about Demon Slayer is that could kill anybody, and I'm like, are you insane? Demon Slayer is so cowardly about how it kills people. Like, it's nuts. None of like, do you care about how if I spoil it?
No.
Go ahead. I stopped about the time
Okay,
not Zeku,
then I'll
the
spoil it.
electric guy came who basically
None
did
of the
one
main
kick.
characters in Demon Slayer die. None of them. Not only do
Oh,
none of the main characters die, the love interest of the main character doesn't die.
yeah, it's ridiculous. They're
The
professional demon
sibling
hunters.
of the main character doesn't die. So the main character survives. Inosuke, the boarhead guy, survives. Zenitsu survives, the lightning guy. His love interest survives. and his foster brother, or like his brother figure,
Okay.
Giyu,
I
the
totally
guy
got
who
the warhead guy and Zenitsu marked down as like they're gonna die heroically. Like they're
yeah,
gonna go
no,
out
they
and
make it
it'll
to the
count.
end,
Nope. Wow.
and Tanjiro survives. I'm like, she didn't kill anybody who was actually
I figured it was
important.
gonna be him or his sister. I didn't know if his
Oh
sister
yeah,
was gonna
and
finally
Nezuko,
turn
you're
and he'd
right,
have to
and
kill her,
Nezuko
or
survived.
if she'd try and save his life and fail. But
Yeah, that's another one. Thank you for reminding me. And Nezuko survives. So I'm like, they didn't kill any important characters in Demon Slayer. Nobody. Now, it is true that they kill a lot of the Demon Slayer core, right? But Ben's reaction when I told him this. He's like, interesting, because my reaction when I saw the Demon Slayer core was, oh, cool, cannon fodder. And he's right. That was exactly my reaction when I saw them. Like, yeah, these guys are disposable. They are not the
trying not
main
to laugh
characters.
louder, but like
Yeah,
you do. Oh my god, we all got the same reaction. Oh no.
they are not the same They are not the main characters. You could kill them with abandon, and it is perfectly fine. I'm like, the only way I can imagine that somebody would say that is if it's it's a story that will kill anyone, is if you're just not that familiar with like anime, right? Like,
Right.
and shonen. So that's what makes me think that a lot of people who are like new to shonen were introduced through Demon Slayer, which is
Yeah.
fine, by the way. It is a good story.
Mhm.
I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying it's not reinventing the wheel. Chainsaw Man is reinventing the wheel. Uh, so first off, I said in Demon Slayer that they don't kill anyone important? Chainsaw Man is the exact opposite of this. They will and do kill anyone at any moment.
Are they
Like,
doing? Then they don't go overboard like Martin, where he's just trying to kill people for shock value.
so, yes and no. There are two death scenes in Chainsaw Man that are probably among the most moving and brutal death scenes in any media that I've ever read. Like, I I actually am going to be careful with spoilers with this because I'm trying to convince you to see it, and a lot of this is part of like the experience of Chainsaw Man. But there are two moments that are some of the most absolutely horrifying death scenes that I've ever read. But here is the real genius of Chainsaw Man. Chainsaw Man is it's brutal, a brutal story. It is violent. It's very violent. Uh, it has a lot of dark black comedy. Uh, it is weird, but the trick that makes Chainsaw Man go from good to masterpiece is that it's superversive. And
Wow. So the
that's
guy
what makes it
who's
special.
so the guy's basically the main protagonist is basically fused with, of all things, a chainsaw demon in a demon hunting outfit. That's crass, cold, and mercenary. But you're saying it's superversive.
So, not exactly. The main character is Denji, and Denji's whole thing is that he grew up in an abusive environment. His father was killed by the mob, or and because his father died, now he's been saddled with all of the mob's debts. So the only way for Denji to pay off debts to the mob is to kill demons and to take whatever meager pay they underpay him for the cost of the demons, right? And he's working with a chainsaw devil whose life he spared, who he says, "Here's the deal. You work with me, and I'll let you have a taste of my blood so you can also survive." And then they kind of become friends, him and the chainsaw devil, as they kill demons for the mob so that he doesn't die. He lives in a shack. He can barely afford to eat. He's starving. He barely interacts with people. He's like an animal, right? Like, that's Denji. Denji is basically living the life of an animal. He's not a bad person, uh, but he has such limited life experience that he could barely interact
Like
with the real world.
Leon from the Professional.
That I don't know the reference, so I can't say.
Oh
Uh,
well, non-anime reference. But movie called The Professional that you maybe need to see. But go ahead.
I'll look
It,
it up later. Uh, the professional movie. Okay. Anyway,
It's weird. It's a
so
weird
Denji
movie.
at one point is the chainsaw devil is killed But the way the devils work in the universe, it gets fairly convoluted, and this is one of my criticisms of Chainsaw Man. But he fuses with Denji, so that Denji, the Chainsaw Devil that Denji was friends with, is now Denji's heart. And he makes a deal with Denji that he'll keep Denji alive. In exchange, Denji needs to go and seek out the beautiful life, the good life that they had been dreaming of together. The thing about Denji, though, and what makes him so interesting, is that Denji is so low in the world that his idea of a good life, when the story starts, is literally, I want to have jam on my bread. Like, that's his idea of living the good life. He can't even conceive, his mind can't go any higher than that.
Yeah.
That's how he thinks. So, he fuses with the Chainsaw Devil, and they see him, while fused with the Chainsaw Devil, and now as Chainsaw Man, slaughter an entire, room full of devils and murder the zombie devil. And the chainsaw hunting organization sees him do this and says, you're joining us now. You're joining the demon hunting society.
Right.
And one of the things that people so the story is about Denji is taken from the absolute lowest state he could possibly be in. And then he is put into a world that still doesn't really care about him, but all of a sudden he has comfort and he starts to form relationships with other human beings. He gets friends, and he slowly becomes more human, and his desires become less animalistic. And then it's all ripped away from him in the cruelest way that it possibly could be. Just utterly torn from him. And it is revealed that all of the people who he cared about and he thought maybe cared about him actually did not value him as a person at all. They only valued the Chainsaw Devil in him. And all of his friends are ripped away, and that life is ripped away. And now he needs to decide what to do about it. And that's and how to respond to this. But the beautiful thing about Chainsaw Man is that it asks these questions, and the answer it comes to is that that life is painful. Life is pain. Horrible things happen, and you can't prevent it. But the way what matters is how you respond. Are you going to keep living? Are you going to keep pushing forward? And the answer that Chainsaw Man comes to is yes, you should. The world of Chainsaw Man is dark and brutal, and anyone can die at any moment. But so you live the life that you can, right?
Yep.
You live as well as you can, and it's about Denji turning into a human. Denji starts at the level of an animal, and he slowly starts to integrate himself into society. It is slow. His progress, his build, his progress is slow. And he builds, his character very slowly, but he grows, and that growth is there. We're now, part 1 of Chainsaw Man honestly told a complete story on its own, a very good one. So, we're now in part 2 of Chainsaw Man, which, if anything, is at least just as good as part 1. It's fantastic right now.
Yes.
What were you going to say, Ben?
Oh, I was just laughing at some of the stuff that has happened in the last chapter or so.
Yes.
Absolute 10 out of 10, Kino.
It's absolutely true. The other thing, too, is just that Chainsaw Man is such a freaking wild ride as well. Even on a completely, if you take out this higher level of analysis that I'm giving it, that I would argue pushes it to the level of classic, there is even a lower level of enjoyment of it is just a wildly creative story. Fujimoto will do things that are just completely horrifying and insane, and that you can barely believe you're reading. And he won't just do it, he will do it frequently. There was a scene, it's not really a spoiler because I'm not going to tell you the background of what's going on. There was a scene in part 2, relatively recently, just a few chapters ago, where he just shows random people standing in an apartment, and they're friends. Clearly, they know each other, and they're talking and they're celebrating. One of them got a promotion at work, and they go, "Hey, we should celebrate!" And they all cheer, and everybody's like, "Oh, I'm so happy for you. I'm glad." And then in this chapter, in one of like the wildest scenes I can ever remember reading, one of them goes, "Hey, I have an idea. Why don't we all just die?" And the other one goes, "Hey, that's a good idea. Let's go. Let's all just die." And they just go and walk out the window and plummet to their death. And that's the scene. It is like legitimately one of the wildest things that I have ever read, I think, in a manga was that moment. Like pure horror moment. And he does this regularly. Again, there are 2 death scenes in Chainsaw Man, and Ben knows what I'm talking about, right?
Yep.
That are among the most brutal death scenes I think that have ever been included in a manga. They're up there, like, I wouldn't say they're quite up to the brutality of the Eclipse, because that also included an extremely graphic and horrifying rape. But close. They're close in terms of brutality. But yeah, Chainsaw Man, high recommendation. It is a great story. It's like nothing else in Shonen Jump. It takes the basic idea of demons are around, demon hunting organization that is used in 2 other manga that are currently like either just finished or are currently running, and goes in a completely wild direction with it that is utterly unexpected in every way. Highest recommendation.
Yeah. A couple more things, notes on Shonen Jump. The stuff we talked about is just pretty good. Full recommends on a lot of it. Um, some things that I find weird is that I feel like Shonen Jump's kind of changing a little bit about what they're choosing. Maybe I haven't paid attention to what comes and goes as much, but it feels like things like Red Hood, Ayashimon, which JD Cohen mentioned as like maybe Fabric at 100 won't last just because that.
Yeah,
Super
I'm
smartphone.
crossing my fingers for it, but I suspect that's going to end up being the case.
Yep, like
Who
super.
knows, though?
Yeah, like some of these things are just like shocks to me. Like why wasn't Super Smartphone continued? Like I see why Aliens Area wasn't continued, or Doron Doraron, even though Doron Doraron told a really good story in a decent amount of time. Earthchild was garbage, such garbage. And it's like, but then I look at things like uh, Beat in Motion, which I think is actually not really part of the magazine itself. Elusive Samurai, Jiangxi X, and others, and I just kind of I don't like them. I don't get them. I don't want them around. Stop it, please. Just leave.
We've discussed Super Smartphone before, and I like you very much enjoyed it. Super Smartphone is in many ways like almost the opposite of Fabricate 100, in that I think that the premise is terrible, but the story is somehow good anyway. Like
Right.
it's such a dumb premise, and the story is actually like really entertaining. Uh, but I'm not sure what they were doing with Super Smartphone, because they did promise that they would like continue the story in a volume they would release later. So maybe they worked out some deal with them.
They've been saying that
I'm
stuff though.
not sure.
None of it ever comes to pass.
I don't know. I'm actually gonna look up Super Smartphone now. You've made me curious because I haven't thought about it in a while. But yeah, you're right. It's very enjoyable. It's a Japanese manga when it's collected in 3 blah 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 blah. Publishing chapters in English simultaneously. Whatever. Okay. Nothing on Wikipedia is not helping. Oh well.
Wikipedia's gotten worse and worse and worse.
It has. The internet's dying. Topic for another day.
Yay!
I know Brian Niemeyer brings this up a lot, so.
I'm gonna change my image to my personal favorite Void meme. Yes. Yes.
Favorite what?
Void meme, the schizophrenia. David.
Oh, the void. Yeah, like the void meme. I get you.
Here it is. Where
Now,
is it?
anything you want to add on Shonen Jump before we move on? Only other thing I'll say is that I've talked about Spy Family before. I'm going to mention it again briefly. I love it. It's still great. I highly recommend it. Lots and lots of fun. Great anime adaptation and great manga.
Oh yeah. Yep. So we'll move on from here. Uh, I don't know, Anthony. You make the choice for this one. You make the choice.
Well, let me see what I had on my list of things. There was
Movies.
so
Still pop culture, maybe. So there's a unifying theme.
oh yeah, we're staying in pop culture. How about, since we mentioned this at the beginning, though maybe not everyone heard it because my voice wasn't included initially. Phoenix Wright series, or the Ace, or more accurately, the Ace Attorney series. I like it.
Objection.
So David, you
just
know the
had to.
memes. Have you played it?
I know, but I had to do it.
No, yeah, the
I'm only
memes
so
are.
strong, Anthony. I'm only so strong.
I understand. So, here's my experience with Phoenix Wright and why I want to talk about it. About a year-ish ago, I would say, maybe a little bit longer actually, because I'm trying to think if I did during COVID or not. I can't remember. But I decided there was a new game that was coming out in the Ace Attorney series. It had come out relatively recently. Great in Japan anyway. Great Ace Attorney. And it was a Sherlock Holmes pastiche. It was Ace Attorney in Victorian England. And I'm a sucker for Sherlock Holmes. I love Sherlock Holmes. I liked Sherlock. I'm a fan of all of these adaptations and things. So I saw that and I'm like, ooh, I want to play that. And I saw it was in the Ace Attorney series. So I looked it up about how much it would cost to get, and it was $40 for 2 games, or for $30, I could get the original Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney trilogy that was 3 games. So I said, well, I don't even know if I'll like the gameplay of the series or not, or if I'll like it. So, and this is a better deal. So I'll just get the original, and then if I like it, I'll get Great Ace Attorney, right? It's cheaper. It'll tell me if I like it, plus a better value for dollar anyway. And I was very pleasantly surprised that at how much I enjoyed it. I expected the Phoenix Wright series to be very I guess the word would be juvenile, perhaps. Like, I thought it would be fun, but okay. But much to my surprise, they actually attempted to tell pretty complex and emotional stories. Now, don't get me wrong, part of the fun and appeal of Ace Attorney is the ridiculousness of it. And I absolutely would not give that up either. It's very ridiculous. There's spirit channeling as part of the plot. There's, like, prosecutors bring whips into the courtroom and whip the judge. That's a real thing. There's Godot, who is incredible. He is a coffee addict, and at various points in the trials, he will throw his coffee at Phoenix, and it'll just drip down his face. So it's a very, very ridiculous series, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But what really surprised me was the first game has 5 cases. It was originally created with 4 cases, and then a 5th case was added when they updated it for the Nintendo DS. It's been re-released like 3 or 4 times, the original trilogy. So it has 5 cases now. It originally had 4, which means that the 4th case was originally the finale case. Ace Attorney games, traditionally the finale case will try and wrap all the stories up together and all of the dangling plot threads into a neat bow. Well, the original Ace Attorney, the 5th case doesn't do that because that was DLC that was added later. The 4th case does that Turnabout Goodbyes is the name of it. All of the games are called Turnabout something. All of the cases have the word turnabout in it. I don't know why. Apparently it's related to the fact that it's called Turnabout Trial in Japan. But the fourth case is called Turnabout Goodbyes. And Turnabout Goodbyes was the first time I played Ace Attorney, and I actually got invested enough in the plot to be like, this isn't just a good Ace Attorney case or like a fun Ace Attorney game. This is a good case. Like, this is a good mystery with good writing. And the premise of the case is that the prosecutor, who has been your rival throughout the game, Prosecutor Edgeworth, is accused of a murder because he is out on a boat in the middle of a lake, and the man he is talking to on the boat is shot, and Edgeworth is found with a loaded gun that had just emptied his bullet in the boat next to the dead man. So, naturally, he is the prime and it's seemingly only suspect for this murder. It looks ironclad, as, all good Ace Attorney cases are. So, how are you going to get out of this? And you need to defend the prosecutor. And the person that you are defending is Edgeworth's mentor. Or that you are facing, sorry. Your enemy prosecutor in this case is Edgeworth's mentor, Manfred von Karma, who has been undefeated. It's incredible.
Just the name alone.
Oh, it's incredible. It's so over the top. Manfred von Karma, who has been undefeated in court for 40 years. And who was Edgeworth's mentor, and Edgeworth was already known as being, like, incredibly difficult to beat and intense. And he's his mentor, and he's been undefeated for 40 years. J.D. Cohen goes, all right, von Karma. Yep. Turnabout Goodbyes is already, like, a really, there's a lot of a lot of intrigue, I guess I would say. Just that the idea that you're now defending your rival throughout the game, already a smart idea. They reuse this, of course, multiple times throughout the series. The Great Ace Attorney games even use it eventually, where you need to defend the prosecutor. But, it's already a good setup for a mystery. It's a really juicy moment. But then they also start wrapping in things that were, like, set up throughout the game, where you go, like, so why would somebody... Obviously, Edgeworth was framed, right? Why would somebody frame him? And then it goes back to something that has been hinted at since the second case of the game, the DL6 incident that had happened, like, a decade ago. And you start getting wrapped up in, like, these old cases. You start dealing with corrupt prosecutors and corrupt cops, and everything gets bigger and bigger and bigger until finally the case ends with some of the truly most insane stuff in Ace Attorney, where at one point, famously in the game, you need to interrogate a parrot because Phoenix has literally run out of ideas, and he's going... Like, the premise of the parrot interrogation is that literally the judge is about to end the trial because you've run out of witnesses, and it really, really looks like Edgeworth is going to do it. Edgeworth did it. And there is absolutely no reason to continue the trial. So Phoenix is like, no, there's another witness. I'm going to interrogate this parrot.
Like the far side where they're all like, okay, the new hideout is at 456 Edge Street. Let's all repeat it 5 times. And the parrot's sitting there in the corner.
That's a really good one. Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff. And then it ends with, like, one, just an absolutely insane moment. Ace Attorney is famous for a few things. It's famous for freakouts. When you, the whole gameplay of Ace Attorney is based around 2 things. There is the investigation segments. They play like an adventure game. And you know what an adventure game, like, you wander around finding clues, right? So investigation segments are just an adventure game. I don't like them. I tolerate them at best. Sometimes there are amusing moments and you get to see the characters interact. But ultimately, you want to get to what makes Ace Attorney unique, and which is the trial segments. And the trial segments are, the prosecutor will call a witness to the stand because the world of Ace Attorney takes place in a dystopia where trials take place after a single day of investigation and then need to be concluded in 3 days, and where everything is stacked in the literally everything is stacked in the prosecutor's favor. So they can call anybody as a witness, including the defendant. And there's
Wow.
nothing you can do about it.
And
And
and it's not enough that your guy is innocent. Somebody else must be fingered for the crime.
oh yeah, that's the rule in Ace Attorney is that you can't just prove your guy innocent. You got to prove someone else guilty. There have been some incredible parody things that people have made based on this. There was one the other day where it's like Phoenix is on trial and he goes, "All right, I've literally proven with 20 different separate pieces of evidence with absolute ironclad proof that Maya cannot possibly have been the killer. Can we please leave?" And then, like, you see Edgeworth goes, "Objection." And he goes, "What? What can you possibly have to say now?" He goes, "All right, you might have proven that she didn't do it, but then if she didn't do it, who did do it, huh, Mr. Wright?" And he goes, "I don't fucking know. I'm the defense attorney. Why do I care?"
I don't know. Would you hire Phoenix Wright or John C. Wright as your defense attorney?
If I were in Japanifornia, I would hire Phoenix Wright, which is, by the way,
Ouch.
Jap-
And we still love John
Japanifornia
Wright.
is yeah, Japanifornia is the old joke that it actually is set in Japan, but when they localized it for some baffling reason, they decided to move it to like some vaguely American city that I think is supposed to be San Francisco, even though there are cultural references that clearly don't make any sense. So people have just started referring to it as Japanifornia.
I love it.
So if I were in Japanifornia, I'd take Phoenix Wright, but in the American court system, John C. Wright all the way. But yeah, they have the meme skit was pretty good. He's like, "So then who did do it?" And Phoenix goes, "I don't fucking know." He's like, "I'm the defense attorney. Why do I care?"
It's not my
And
job.
he goes, and then the judge goes, "Well, you forget, Mr. Wright, that I lack object permanence, and if I don't have anybody else, then I'm going to have to think that, and I'm going to have to assume that Maya did it. Do you have anyone else to accuse?" So Phoenix goes like, "So let me get this straight. You want me to accuse somebody with no evidence just so that you have another suspect?" You're like, "Yes, that sounds right." He goes, "All right, then Edgeworth did it." And then he's like, "Why me?" He goes, "I don't know. There's as much evidence for you as for Maya, but you're kind of a dick." And he's like, "Your Honor, that doesn't make any sense." He goes, "Really? Because you've been trying to accuse Maya this entire time. Seems a little sus." And then he's like, seems kind of like deflection. He's like, he makes a good point. Edgeworth, you are hereby sentenced to immediate death by vat of acid. Drops him in. He goes, "Oh my god." He goes, "Okay, so Maya, I'm pretty sure we just killed an innocent man." He's like, "Want to just leave?" The memes are good. There was another one that was like Phoenix and Maya is his assistant. Yeah, Maya's his assistant, by the way. So him and Maya are walking around, and it's like supposedly the night before a trial. So he goes, "Okay, how about this?" He goes, "If we found this footprint, and we know that this footprint proves that he had to have been left-handed because he's like has this really long convoluted chain of events." And he goes, "Yes, I've got it. I've never been more prepared for a trial." And then Maya goes, "Oh yeah, by the way, who are we defending again?"
Oh
And
my
he
god.
stares at her and he goes, "It's not you, is it?" Which, by the way, he's the defendant like 4 different times in the series because it's
Oh my
always
goodness.
dramatic that Maya's your assistant's on
I'm
trial.
reminded of the Deadpool episode where there's a murder and they set out to determine who did it. And he proves he did it.
That's actually really funny. That's a clever idea for a Deadpool story. But yeah, you want to know something though? Like I genuinely appreciate Phoenix Wright. I really appreciate. So Maya is like his assistant in the games, and the story behind Maya is that she is a spirit medium, and she is the sister of Phoenix Wright's boss, who was murdered in the first case, or in the second case. Yeah. Spoilers of a something-year-old game or something like
Right.
that. I'm not even spoiling the ending. It's the
I
beginning of
enjoy
the
the
game.
memes.
The
That's
memes are
kind of
good.
how I'm at the point with it.
Oh, the memes are good. But what I really appreciate about it is that so Maya is the sister of Phoenix's boss who gets murdered in the second case. And uh you originally like you meet her having to defend her because she's been framed for the murder, and you do, and then she kind of attaches herself to you. What I really like about it is that Maya is a 16-year-old girl, and her and Phoenix become friends like over the course of the series. But I appreciate the work they put into the relationship, if that makes sense. Like, it genuine like they don't just stick them together and then just go, all right, now you're working together. Like, they genuinely put the work in to establish why they would become friends. Like, so she is the sister of Phoenix's boss, who is dead, right, and who Phoenix was close to, right? Like, he was, he calls her chief, like she was his mentor, you know. And she is his sister. She's her as far as Phoenix knows, she doesn't have any other family, and she says like she's basically all alone, you know. And he defends her in this trial, so she immediately becomes like attached to him. So she sort of inserts herself as your assistant in the next case, even though she doesn't have legal assistance. And Phoenix, of course, is the sort of guy where it's like this poor girl's sister was just killed. She's all alone in the world. She has nobody else. He's not going to tell her to leave, right? Like, he's not evil. Uh, and then they show your relationship kind of build over the course of the games. Like in the next case, she helps you out more and more. She gets a little character arc where she starts to wonder if she's useless, and then, she does things that help you win the trial. And the game ends on a really touching moment where Maya is going to leave and go back to her village to like continue her spirit training. And Phoenix grabs her and tells her like, "You're not useless. If it weren't for you, I would have lost this case." Like, and you just helped to save an innocent man's life. I expect to see you again. And it ends on a really touching moment where like she's leaving and she's in tears and she's waving to Phoenix. And I really appreciate this because it's like they clearly, becomes an Ace Attorney staple eventually that you get like a teenage girl assistant. It to the point where it's kind of a running joke of the series. But when they originally introduced this conceit, they don't just stick it in there. You know what I mean? Like, they put a lot of work in making it make sense. Like, Phoenix does not come off as a creep in this relationship, is I guess what I'm trying to get at. Like, that why are you hanging around with a teenage girl? Well, actually, there are a lot of pretty good reasons that they give why they become friends. And then they build it over the course of the games. And Maya is, a lot of people's, including a lot of people's favorite characters. She's a good character in her own right. Also, it would be remiss if I did not mention the greatest musical theme in all of video games. And I do not say this lightly. It is the fragrance of dark coffee. And it is the prosecutor theme for the prosecutor in the third case. Or in the third game of the series. So, in the third game of the series, each game introduces a new prosecutor who is going to be like your main antagonist, for the series. It's one
Undefeated.
of the fun things. What was that?
Prodigy. He's undefeated. He's a prodigy. Never lost
Exactly.
a single case. Executed
So,
15 people with his own hands in front of the judge.
exactly. So by the third game, you've already faced Edgeworth, who was like a prodigy who became a lawyer when he was young and he was a
15
genius.
people with his
Yeah.
hands.
And then you're introduced to Manfred von Karma, who went 40 years undefeated until you beat him.
Who's the
Then
one with
you're
the mask
introduced.
on his face? The
I'm
mask.
about.
Dodo.
Yeah, I'm getting to that. Then you get to Franziska von Karma, who became a prosecutor at the age of 13.
Oh no.
Uh, that, and
It's
then
so
she's 18.
Japanese. It's
Yeah,
so
she's
anime.
18 by the time you face her, but she became a prosecutor at the age of 13 and is 18 when you face her. So she's like a super genius. So now by the third game, it's like, how on earth can you possibly top that? And you just sort of can't. So they go, who's the prosecutor? Oh, it's Godot. And I go, who's Godot? And like Godot is almost talked about like he's a legend. It's like you're facing the mysterious prosecutor Godot, who has
Masked
never,
villain.
yes, and he's like he has never lost a case. It's like, how have I not heard of this guy? And then
It's
the
a
incredible,
secret.
well, the incredible reveal with Godot, he's like, that's right, I've never lost a case because this is the first case I've ever prosecuted. He goes, yeah, I used to be, and then like
Oh
it
my
actually becomes,
goodness.
and so which is an incredible reveal. Uh, but Godot is amazing. For some reason, he hates Phoenix. He says cryptically wise-ish sounding things that are completely ridiculous, and he drinks 17 cups of coffee per trial. He is a ludicrous character, and the incredible thing about Godot is, again, I want to give like genuine credit to Ace Attorney that his story, like I once saw a poll, what cases did any case in Phoenix Wright move you to tears? And it's always Godot's story. He actually becomes like the most emotional and moving part of probably the entire Ace Attorney saga. Like he actually has a incredibly tragic story.
I mean, I'm now sold at somebody swaggering up, going, "I've never lost a case because this is my first case."
Oh, Godot is
That's
amazing.
just amazing.
He also has, yeah, David, I'm gonna link this to you later because it's true. It's probably my favorite musical theme in all of video games. It's called the scent of, or the fragrance of dark coffee, or something, or the fragrance of black coffee, and it's Godot's theme. So the prosecutor theme always plays whenever Phoenix feels like he's doing well and they want to dial it back a bit. The prosecutor theme will play, and Godot will say something cryptic and clever, but that's also like, if you actually think about it, really dumb. Uh, and then Phoenix will need to respond in some way. Yeah, a typical Ace Attorney gameplay. But the genius of Godot's theme is that it's used in 3 different ways. It's used as the theme in his trials when he's introducing something to Phoenix, and in this case, it sounds very cool and jazzy, but it's a little bit comical because Godot is so over the top. Then it's introduced. I'm spoiling like a 20-year-old game, so sorry about
No,
that. Uh,
don't do that.
then it's introduced later in the series as you flash back to Godot and you learn about his backstory, and he used to be a defense attorney whose name was Diego Armando. So Godot, get it?
Right.
Uh,
Okay.
anyway, his name was Diego Armando, and he used to work with your mentor, Mia, the one who was murdered in the first game. And you play a flashback case as Mia, and the flashback case ends in a truly horrifying way, where you're defending like a mentally ill, or basically a mentally slow criminal who has been manipulated into everything by a femme fatale. And before he can rat her out, he kills himself on the stand. Like it's a pretty horrifying moment. And Godot, they start playing his theme at the end as he's talking to Mia. And all of a sudden, the theme, which was very silly, becomes like very sad, as he's telling you, and very romantic as well. And you realize that there's a romance between Godot and Mia. That was a genuine romance that starts to fill in the pieces of the puzzle of why Godot doesn't like you. Yeah, like why Godot hates you. And then finally, the whole thing ends, again, 10-year-old game spoilers, with after this absolutely ludicrously convoluted trial, the most convoluted trial in the entire series, probably, at least it's up there, Bridge to Turnabout, which involves like multiple spirit mediums and multiple spirits being used in multiple locations, bodies being being tied to ropes, and then slingshotted across ravines. Like, so many absolutely absurd things in this trial, only for the final reveal to be that the ultimate killer was Godot, who was protecting Maya from the actual villain who, like, it's very convoluted. I'm not even going to try, but
It
he
was
was the
him
killer.
all along.
Yeah,
All
he was
along.
the killer is what you need to do.
All
And it's
along.
and finally Godot gives a final speech to like Phoenix where he reveals he's like, "Hey, you know what? Like I really, you finally earned my respect." And Phoenix kind of shares a cup of coffee with him, which is very funny. Uh, but he's like, "You finally earned my respect." But then he starts explaining like why he did it. He's like, "I was in love with, Mia and I were in love, and I woke up years later, and Mia was dead, and I learned that you were the one who was working with her, right? So I need to figure out how good you were." And goes, and I said I was gonna protect your sister, and he's like, and you finally figured it's like, yeah, I killed her to save Maya. And then he's like, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "Don't you know? A lawyer only cries," which is a saying from like the first game that Mia says. And he goes, "A lawyer only cries when it's all over," and you see blood dripping down his face. And they start playing his theme. And holy crap, the theme in this moment is actually really tragic. Like, it has transformed again from vaguely comical to kind of romantic to actually really tragic. Like, it's a very sad moment in the case and in the game, but it's beautifully done. Really, really well done. Ace Attorney, for as silly as it can be, that's what impressed me about it. Is that I expected the silliness, and I enjoy that aspect of it very much. Don't get me wrong. What I did not expect was the attempt, sometimes successful, to tell a serious story and to actually execute it really well.
Yeah, I admit, I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah, I know, right? uh, JD Cohen says, "Fantastic game." It is. That's Trials and Tribulations. Uh, I recommend it. I recommend. So the Phoenix Wright games tend to be looked at on a case like there tends to be sort of a
Case
tiering.
by case basis.
Ha ha ha! Right.
Yuck,
I was
yuck,
gonna
yuck.
say there tends to be a tiering system for the games where it's like these are the S tier, A tier. The original trilogy is like considered mostly S tier. The second game is actually considered kind of weak, except for the final case of the second game, which is universally considered, and I agree, one of, if not the best cases in the series. Uh, but yeah, the original trilogy is put in the S tier. The Great Ace Attorney games are put in the S tier. And of all things, the spin-off game, Miles Edgeworth Investigations 2, not the original, 2, is put in the S tier, which has never gotten an official English translation, only a fan translation.
Wow.
And it's considered one of the best games in the entire franchise. I
Holy
haven't
cow.
played it yet. I'm actually really looking forward to it because it's. And then in the tier below that, I don't. No Ace Attorney game is considered to be outright bad. I don't think they're all considered to be pretty good. It's just a matter of how good.
This kind of helps me understand the phenomenon because I've seen the loyal fan base. I'll look at snippets from it and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. But
Yeah, I mean, first off, you got to remember there are like 10 games in this franchise, and these
right.
games are fairly meaty. Like they're not that short, to be honest with you. They're longer than you'd probably expect when you first go into them. Right now, I am on officially in the mainline series, Ace Attorney number 1, 2, 5, Dual Destinies. Dual Destinies, the sequel trilogy to the original Phoenix Wright trilogy, which was not created by the original creator but by a new team, is generally considered to be not as good. It's Apollo Justice Ace Attorney, Phoenix Wright Dual Destinies, and Phoenix Wright Spirit of Justice. And I'm in the middle of Dual Destinies right now, and I gotta tell you, I have been very pleasantly surprised by it because I was considering the reception, which again, it's all relative. All the Ace Attorney games are fairly well received. Like none of them are considered bad. But all things considered, I actually think that it's like much better than I thought it was going to be. There are certainly problems with it. Uh, so The thing about Phoenix Wright is that the original trilogy ends and wraps things up really, really well. And truthfully, if I were them, I would have moved the character of Phoenix into a mentor role and moved on to a new protagonist. So you might
Makes
go,
sense.
well, okay, isn't that what they do? Because the next game is called Apollo Justice Ace Attorney. And theoretically, the protagonist of Apollo Justice is Apollo Justice, not Phoenix Wright. But practically speaking, it's kind of not what they do. So the case, it takes place 8 years in the future from the first game. This is interesting to me to discuss because it's like game criticism, right? And story criticism. So this is in my wheelhouse, story criticism, and how I would change it. You know, it opens up with a pretty good intro case called Turnabout Trump, where you're defending Phoenix, who is on trial for murder 8 years later. And, so, you know, something is kind of weird. And also, J.D. Cohen says the creator went on to Ghost Trick, which is also fantastic. He did, yes. And I've heard it's very good. I have not played it. I do want to. Shu Takumi, by the way, is the creator. He's good. He created how many games in the franchise? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He made 6 games in the franchise. He wrote the Great Ace Attorney games. He wrote the original trilogy, and he wrote Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright, which, by the way, is pretty good. Even the spin-off titles that are combined with other series are pretty good. I actually liked it a lot when I was playing it. I didn't finish it yet, but I liked what I was getting it a lot. But anyway, my criticism of Apollo Justice goes kind of as follows. So, Apollo Justice opens up with you play as Apollo, and you're a new defense attorney, and you are defending Phoenix, who has been accused of a murder 8 years later. You learn some mysterious things have happened in the meantime. For some reason, Phoenix has been disbarred, and it happened about 8 years ago. We don't know the details of why this happened or what happened, right? It's just like a fact now. And he is now like playing piano in a bar, but actually he is a card shark, which is amazing and no complaints. Phoenix goes from being a lawyer to pretending to play piano, but in reality running an underground gambling ring. Uh, 10 of 10, no notes. That's not the problem. Uh, So you have this first trial, and it's fairly good, where you're defending Phoenix along with your mentor, whose name is Kristoff. And then by the end of the trial, the reveal is that Phoenix hired you because he knew that Kristoff did it. So he knew that you had some sort of special ability that could help him, which you do. Phoenix Wright has lots of magic powers and things like that. You have like an ability where you use a magic bracelet to perceive tells in people. It's very weird. Uh, but that's what you came here for, I guess. So, anyway, doesn't matter. The point is, it ends with you convicting your mentor and getting Phoenix off. And I'm like, okay, this is a good case, and I enjoy it. And it has a lot of intrigue that I like, right? What happened with Phoenix, the reveal. The problem that I have is that I don't know anybody involved here. Like, I don't really know Phoenix because I have no idea what's happened in the 8 years, and he's apparently changed a lot. I wouldn't call it like, Luke Skywalker, where this version of the character is entirely unrecognizable.
Yeah, that was also done on purpose.
Yeah, that was on purpose, and I would not say that. I don't think that the character was butchered to that extent. But he was like, okay, 8 years have passed, I've just met him, I don't really know this version of Phoenix very well, right? Like, with that said, I understand why they did it. It gets you automatically invested in the case, with the larger problem of I don't know the protagonist at all, and I don't know his relationships. In theory, Turnabout Trump is a really intense conflict. It is, you're a rookie lawyer. Your hero, it's revealed that he knows Phoenix Wright, who's a famous attorney, and he, kind of idolized him. Your hero is going up against your mentor, right? And you need to turn in your mentor and help out your hero. Like, in theory, this should be a really strong conflict for your protagonist. The problem is, I don't know Apollo at all. So I don't really know his relationship.
Maybe Phoenix Wright sent close to Phoenix Wright, but he's not close to you because he's just been introduced, and you have a tagline that says you should care about this person.
Right, and the case still works on its own merits fairly well, but the problem is, I think it kind of hides some of the problems with the game, because the reason that it works is because I care about Phoenix. I don't
Right.
care about the protagonist. And that's really a shame, because conceptually, that is a great idea for a trial, right? Like a rookie defense attorney having to defend his hero, who also happens to be Phoenix Wright, who you know, from his mentor, who you only learn is guilty over the course of the trial. That is like ready-made drama. The problem is, I'm not attached to Apollo at all. Like, I just don't know enough about him to be attached to him. I don't know his relationship with Kristoff, is the villain of this case. I don't know his relationship to Kristoff. I don't know his relationship to Phoenix. It appears that his relationship amounts to, like, kind of hero worshipping him a bit. And sure, they form a relationship over the game, but what I would have done is I would have split Apollo Justice into 2 games. So I would have had the first game be you and Kristoff with Phoenix, and then you meet Phoenix in the background, and you build up to this as not the first case, but the final case of the game. I think that conceptually, this idea is absolutely strong enough for a final case. Like, if in theory, I think that if you have Apollo going up, like his mentor facing off against his hero, that is good enough for a final case. Like, I think that the requisite emotion is there. Yeah. But you would need to build it. But you would need to build it up. So I would have it be Apollo is working for Kristoff, who again is his mentor, and he runs into Phoenix in the background, and then you have interactions with Phoenix, and you have interactions with Kristoff, and maybe you have the larger story that will eventually turn into this trial in the background, and then you end game 1 of this two-parter with Turnabout Trump, which is the name of that case, with you having to defend Phoenix and then get your mentor convicted. And then I would have had game 2 be very similar to what we actually get in Apollo Justice. Now, what happens in the real game is that you join Phoenix's agency, because Phoenix can't work as a lawyer. So he's raising a daughter. Again, something mysterious, like, the daughter's 15 years old. How does that make any sense? And that's like, a reveal that's going to happen later. And so you join Phoenix's agency in the actual Apollo Justice, and you start trying things for what they call the Right Anything Agency, because he'll literally do anything for money, because he can't be a lawyer. He can't be a lawyer, so he'll do anything for money. So it's the Right Anything Agency. So you're basically working for Phoenix's law office throughout Apollo Justice, and then it ends with a case where Kristoff is brought back, and you need to solve a murder and all of that. I would have made that game 2. Like, I would have had completely different cases for game 1, built it up in a completely different way, and then I would have had game 2, you working for Phoenix's law office, right? I think that would make much more sense. And it would really build it out, and then the final case would hit home more. There was another problem, too, with the final case was actually really good for the first half. The first half of the final case was, like, a very, very strong. The problem is, again, this is why people will sometimes say that Apollo Justice really didn't feel like Apollo's game. It ends with you actually can't find evidence to convict the guy, but there is a reveal that Phoenix, who has engineered this trial to test out a jury system in Japan, because they don't use juries, they just use a judge. He's engineered this trial to test out a jury system, and there is a reveal that Phoenix actually stacked the jury with people he knew would, like, convict this guy. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But I go, okay, that's fine and all, I guess, as far as this goes. And the guy is guilty. Like, it's guilt. He's guilty. You just don't have, like, the specific piece of evidence that would convince the judge, right? So you're supposed to think, like, no, Phoenix is the good guy here. The problem is, Apollo doesn't defeat the villain. Phoenix defeats the villain. Apollo literally cannot find the evidence to convict him, and he loses because Phoenix stacked the jury. Which is, like, really strange for a game called Apollo Justice Ace Attorney.
Right.
Like, I think that was a mistake. I wouldn't have ended it that way, and it really does feel like Apollo kind of got cheated of a major character moment.
Yeah, you gotta let your new people shine in a story.
But this is why I liked Dual Destinies a lot more than I expected. First off, Dual Destinies is completely insane, even for Ace Attorney standards. This time, it opens up with the courtroom being bombed, uh, and this time the prosecutor is an actual convicted felon who they let out of jail specifically to prosecute cases, which is hilarious.
My
Uh,
God, that's insane.
like
That's absolutely mental.
he is an actual murderer, like literally a convicted murderer.
Absolutely mental. They're like, how do we one up using Hannibal Lecter to help catch killers? I know. Absolutely mental. I love it.
Prosecutor Black Quill. So I like that. I already like the insanity of it. Like, don't get me wrong, that you're there for that as well. But I was also really impressed. Like the first case of the game is an intro case, and it was a fairly good intro case. Intro cases kind of need to be judged on their own terms. They're about introducing you to like how the game works and any new mechanics that they introduce, because they always introduce some sort of new gimmick to the game each time. Uh, but the second case, which was the first real case and was led by Apollo, was like several levels of magnitude more complex than any case in Apollo Justice. Which I did like, by the way. It's not like that's a bad game. It's not. Uh, so Apollo gets this game. So Apollo gets this case. That is several levels more convoluted than any case in Apollo Justice. And he gets to win the case at the end. He gets the hero moment. They do introduce a new character who becomes part of it. Your new teenage girl sidekick is Athena Sykes. Yeah,
Right.
this time it's unclear if she should really be considered a sidekick, but she's a teenager and she's a girl, so I'm gonna count her. She is also a lawyer, but she's 18, because much like the other prodigy lawyer, she was
Right.
trained in Europe, and if you train in Europe, that explains everything. Uh, Literally, like that's what they do. Like if they want you to be really young and be a lawyer, you just trained in Europe. You trained in Europe, and that explains that. Uh, Europe just lets children be lawyers. Uh, they let children become lawyers. So she's your new teenage girl sidekick, and
Alright.
while she and she's a lawyer, and while she does do a lot in the case, they do give Apollo the hero moment at the end of a very complex case. And I appreciated that a lot. Like, I thought Apollo needed that in a big way. Uh, it felt to me kind of like an apology for Apollo Justice. Like, they give him this very complex and very intense case. Now I'm currently playing what is technically the DLC case, but when I read up on the game, I was told that this DLC case slots in third in the run. And in this one, Phoenix defends a. So there's the.
You're
Uh,
breaking up, Anthony.
I said I'm now playing the DLC case, and in which
Okay.
slots in third in the timeline. So it's the third case I'm playing in the game, and in this one, Phoenix defends a whale. Uh, just straight up defends a whale. Uh,
It
that is the
just doesn't
defendant.
stop being insane. I'm sorry.
No,
Like I keep
it's so
thinking,
good.
like, okay, we'll go to another subject, and you bring up some other like absolutely like wall bangingly nuts thing about Phoenix, right?
Uh, anyway,
There's just
recommended. Fun
nothing they
game.
won't do.
No, fun games. Good series. Recommended. Uh, Surprisingly good writing at times, and you come for the insanity and you stay for the surprisingly well written character relationships. Yeah, so recommended. Uh, Other things I had on the list, we'll do one more because I know you read it, David, and sorry, Ben, this is not you, unless you have something you want to talk about.
No.
Okay, then I'll bring it up. The D&D movie. You saw it,
Yep.
correct?
Yeah.
I thought it was okay. It was fine. I enjoyed
It
it.
was a fun 2 hours. I I'd put it at a solid, entertaining movie. Great thing that you have to go and see? No. But a fun, good time, popcorn movie? Yeah.
Yeah, I would put it somewhere in like the C plus tier, I guess. Something like that. And I might be being even a little harsh. Like I enjoyed it. Yeah, it was definitely a good movie. Uh, with that said, the reason that I wanted to discuss it is because the movie kind of fascinated me. Because while I enjoyed it, I could see it trying to work its way around the rules. And so, for people who don't know what I mean, I'm referring to the rules of modern cinema, and specifically the rules of how you are allowed to portray men and women in movies. There are very specific rules of what you are allowed to do. So, one of the rules is that men can never rescue women on their own. Men can be a part of a team that rescues women. Women can rescue other women. Men can attempt to rescue women who can then escape. Uh, but I'm trying to think of how to put it. You cannot actually be a man who just rescues a woman. So, in the movie, we have our main boy, who's Chris Pine, likable guy, does a good job. Uh, and he needs to rescue his daughter, except that he can't rescue his daughter on her own. He needs to team up with a good fighter. The good fighter, of course, happens to be a woman. Now, he is portrayed, though he is the leader, like, I will be clear here. I want to say there's subtleties to this, and I don't mean to imply that there's not. He's the leader, but he's portrayed as incompetent, comically so. They make fun of him all the time for being a failure. She is portrayed as almost hyper competent, where like she is being dragged down by him, if anything, and she rolls her eyes at everything he says and does. Now he still functions as the leader, but this dynamic is very important. Competent woman, kind of buffoonish guy. And you do have more examples of the rules later. So they try and have a romance, and the romance is lame between a tiefling. The romance is weak. I didn't really despise it, but it's pretty weak.
I didn't really
Between
like them either.
yeah,
I'll get to
between
my
a
notes in
wizard
bit.
and a tiefling who's like a shapeshifter. I don't play D&D, so I don't know all of these things off the top of my head. I think though
My
she's
nerd
like
lore
a
is
shape.
strong. Feel free to ask me when you need.
Yep. So, but in the movie, she was a tiefling, and the way that it is portrayed is that the wizard, who is male, uh, is very incompetent to the point of, again, being almost comically incompetent. And he says he was courting the tiefling at one point, and she rejected him because he was pathetic. This is rule 2. If there is some sort of romance in these sorts of movies, then the man needs to live up to the high expectations of the woman. Uh, right? The woman doesn't need to live up to the man. That never, ever, ever happens, right? A woman living up to a man, that is against the rules. It can't happen. The man always needs to live up to the high standards set by the woman. And that is what we see here. The tiefling is very competent, very impressive, very good at what she does. The wizard is
Very spurgy.
incompetent. What was that?
I said very spurgy.
Very spurgy. Yeah, she is.
I mean,
That's true.
I don't think any. Well, I'll wait till you're done, then I'll get in mine.
Yeah, that's fine. Now, when I say all of this, and so he needs to live up to her high expectations. When they do their thing to rescue his daughter at the end, notably they all do it together. Also, by the way, other mistake in the movie, and again, I think this goes to like modern movies hate romance. He absolutely should have been romantically involved with the female barbarian girl who's been going around with them. Like
Yes,
110%.
that
That
would
would
have
have made
worked, and it would have made it
way
a
better than
stronger
what they
movie.
had. Yeah.
Would have made
Or maybe way better is a little harsh because I did think it worked as is, but it would have been better.
It would have worked. They could have had the chemistry, and because again, there's sort of like a sort of like she was almost like the mother to the daughter when they
Yeah,
rescued her and
exactly.
all this. Like
It was
could
really
have
weird
worked.
too.
You could have
It,
actually sort of put a barrier up between the two, and it's clear they're looking for the excuse, and then when surprise ending happens, they could have kissed, and it would have worked perfectly.
100%.
Like, this whole they never talked about it, but like it was there. Could it come out?
But that
But
would
they
have
didn't do it.
involved changing the dynamic between them, right? It would have involved changing the dynamic so that she wasn't as contemptuous of him, and he, all sorts of things like that.
It was. Well, I'll get to the rejoinder on your points here. But yes.
So I'm gonna end it. I get where your rejoinder is gonna go, so I'm gonna end it with something like this, where you probably. I don't mean to say that there are subtleties here. The fascinating thing to me about this movie is that it wasn't bad and it worked around this in subtle and clever ways and did it fairly well. But that's what fascinates me about this movie. It had to follow the rules. It could not just ignore them. It needed to follow them. It couldn't just portray a regular romance. It couldn't just portray a strong father trying to rescue his daughter. It couldn't just portray, a barbarian guy. They do have the elf guy, but he doesn't even join the party. Like,
Oh, the paladin.
Paladin,
Yeah, I
thank
wanted
you,
more
Paladin.
of that dude. He was
He
only
was
in
cool.
for like a third of the movie.
Yeah,
They
so he
were
doesn't even
starting
join
to develop him. You can only develop a character like so much in this tiny amount of time they gave him.
Yeah.
He had his
That's
own
fair.
weird like.
There
fight.
is development. They do work around this fairly well. Chris Pine's character, like, he's good. He's a good actor, and he's a charming guy. Yeah. The storylines that they have for these characters play out fairly well. Like, it worked for the most part. Not masterfully, but competently. It's just fascinating to me that they need to. There are decisions that, in my opinion, they would or should not have made that would have improved the movie that they didn't make because of the rules that they had to follow. Like, instead they were forced to work around it. And to me, this is almost like the pinnacle of what modern cinema can be, because it does a very good job to of working around it, relatively speaking. Not a flawless one, certainly, but good. The storylines work. The story works. The character arc works. It is entertaining. The actors are charming. It's just that in order to be all of this, they need to get past all of these artificial limitations that are set by the studio. And it's just fascinating to me. It's like, why couldn't we just create a normal movie? Indiana Jones, like, why couldn't, Indiana Jones is a movie that couldn't be made today. And we're going to see a very, very good example of this in the abortion that's about to come out.
I'm
Yeah.
not gonna watch it. Maybe I should
I'm
pay
not
someone
either.
else to watch it for me.
Oh,
But
I'm not either. I'm going to watch
the
Critical Bit review and
the thing with
enjoy
this, I agree. Like, it's clear they're dancing around a minefield. It's clear it was forced in there. I agree with your point that yes, it would have actually worked better if Chris Pine and the Barbarian were there, and it even could have been like they had issues and they finally got over it at the end. I don't want to spoil too much, but like it would have been a perfect moment for that to have happened. But that would have been too conventional for today's cinema. It's less she has contempt for him. I still didn't. I never got that vibe, but it is. If you've ever played D&D or you've played any of these online MMO games or anything like this, like different characters have different roles, different stuff that they're good at, right? And if you take someone whose job description is he's a professional sleazebag, like Chris Pine's character, and you put him up in front with the fighters, you're gonna get died. He's just gonna die.
That's fair. I'll allow that.
And so, like, I was expecting that to happen because of modern cinema, but I didn't see it really. But I do agree with you, like, that should have been the romance in there. what they did with the story was these are all flawed people. They're all broken in some way. In the case of the men, it's less incompetence with the wizard, and then it was confidence.
Yeah,
Because he's shockingly capable once he
it was
gets over,
right. It was
like,
confidence.
he
No.
wasn't living up to his lineage. And it made him a garbage sorcerer. And Chris Pine's thing also, he's afraid of failure. He's haunted by what's going on. He's really, his dark mirror is actually Forge. Like, that's what the same men look like, but with, if they took different paths in life, right? Forge is Chris Pine's bard with no conscience, who just uses and abuses and throws away people any way he can. And the problem, honestly, if there's anyone whose relationships got made fun of the worst, it was probably the barbarians. Oh my goodness. Like,
But yes and no. I'm not sure if made fun of is exactly how I would put it in this case. The joke here was that the men of her, village or whatever, their tribe were very small, and that she couldn't hold a man. But there's a subtle difference here in the way it's portrayed that I think is related to following the rules. It's like
Hey
she
guys,
it's
I'm crashing pretty hard.
alrighty.
I'll wrap it
I
up then.
gotta wrap it up, and I'll just leave. I'll just let you wrap up, but I'm gonna give Bradford Walker his due. RE
Yep, yep.
D&D movie. I won't see it because it's made by people that hate me and benefits them and their agenda. Fortunately, it is not meeting expectations, and now Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro are in trouble. And I would like to remind our listeners that giving money to people who hate you is literally is just saying I want to lose. The entertainment value can be gotten from other things. The more cultural voices we give to this stuff, the more we find that our enemies remain. Uh, but then again, mm, they're not going to stop, and the insurance is going to cover it. We just don't want to help them out as much as possible. But if you two would like to give us the last word, and I'll close us out.
Yep, I'll just finish what I was getting at. So the subtlety here is that uh, in the case of the barbarian woman, it was almost like so she was she was too much for him to handle. Almost like she was missing his home and it was depressing and he couldn't. But it wasn't a flaw of her specifically. It was like tragedy in her past, right? Whereas
Right.
with the wizard, it was a flaw of his. It was lack of confidence made him a wuss. With Chris Pine, it is a flaw of his. It is, I'm a terrible person, pretty much, right? Being a bad person and kind of a buffoon. Uh, at least subtly. She does make comments at his expense, I think, fairly often in the movie. But I get your point. You're right that it makes sense as to why, like the relationships between them. But there's a subtlety there, and that's my point. There are subtleties that these people are required to walk because there's a line they need to toe. Because if they don't toe it, they will be accused of an ism that is very important to the people who are running these studios, right? Like, it's not important to literally anybody in the real world. I'm sure that there would be a critic that would bring it up as if anyone would care. But the viewers wouldn't care. The viewers wouldn't care at all. In fact, they would prefer it if that weren't in there. But it is very important to the people running these studios that these rules are very carefully followed. So the line telling is just not. It's not that it ruins the movie. It's that it's really fascinating to me what they need to do to creatively work around these problems and how it does, I think, artificially weaken the film. It turns a film that could have been better than it was into a film that was fine. You can get the last word.
That sounds about right. it was noticeable what had happened, but they also were very, very careful to make sure to still put out something that was quality. It's perhaps the first breath that someone isn't allowed to completely tank a movie just to check boxes. So I think if this was really being done by fanatics, it would have been an absolute disaster. And clearly it was not, to me anyways, it was not fanatics that were producing this.
Yeah.
This was people who wanted to make workable art who were dealing with the constraints that weren't in their control.
Yeah, one last comment really, really fast that I want to make. I promise it's quick. In terms of the rules of men can never ever rescue a woman, there is a scene we got from the library, so we literally didn't pay for it. The James Gunn Suicide Squad, called The Suicide Squad. Pretty decent movie. But there is a moment where Harley Quinn is captured by the villains, and then they go to rescue her. And I immediately said, there is not a chance. Yeah,
Right.
not a chance that they will rescue her. She is going to free herself because she's already rescued herself. Because they're all men in this group. There actually was one woman, but it was led by men. It was very masculine oriented, and men can't rescue women. And sure enough, they get there, and she's out of the jail, and they make that exact comment. And I said, I knew it. I knew they would not be able to rescue her. And this is following a totally ridiculous fight scene where she is beating multiple armed men, and it's I'm sorry, my disbelief suspends to a point. But she doesn't even have any
never
powers.
in the comics portrayed, or the anime
Yeah.
being portrayed as equal to Batman and martial combat.
She doesn't even have any powers to explain this. How is she beating men? And how did she escape? How is this possible? It doesn't make any sense. It was actually a fairly entertaining movie, and it had its moments, but there you go. That's it.
Okay.
Drink your Ovaltine, folks. Misha Burnett next week.
Gotta check in with him, make sure it's all right, but that's the plan. All right, guys. Yes. I don't know. Anyway, guys, I'm pretty tired. I was up till 2 last night and such and such. So I will let you guys go. Join us next week for something but Misha Burnett in the immediate future. And I hope you all have a wonderful week. Bye.
Take care.